Greetings, viewers. It's been a while since I made a proper video, but finally we're here with Borderlands 1.5. I say finally because America got it 3 days before us, and I'm a little bit salty about it, but I did get it a day before we were meant to in Europe, so I can't be too angry. I'm going to be starting my own playthrough of it soon. Before that, I want to have a look at the character skill trees properly. Before this, we've always just picked a character at face value and jumped into the game. I've ended up getting to level 50 on more than one occasion thinking, wow, my skill tree is really bad because I didn't really look at it beforehand. So I'm going to be having a look at each character before I get started with the game and posting them as videos. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first character we're going to be looking at is Athena, the Gladiator character class. This is someone I've got my eye on as a melee character. I'd quite like to start the game off as a melee character. Action skill, Kinetic Aspis. Press action skill to raise your Aspis and absorb all frontal damage. Aspis can store a finite amount of absorbed damage as energy based on your level, and it's then thrown at the end of the active duration, or if you press action skill again. Creates an explosion upon impact, dealing base damage plus double the stored energy before returning to you. It's potentially very, very good. It's, even as a melee build, that's definitely very useful because it allows you to move up to enemies without taking any frontal damage. If none of that damage filters through to you, then that's extremely useful. Not so much if you get some of the damage, but I assume you won't. I assume that's kind of absorbing everything coming towards you. So that's very, very good. That's basically creating a complete sink into which enemy damage is just going nowhere. We'll move to the leftmost tree. Phalanx, which kind of denotes defense, or probably something to do with the Aspis itself. Invictus increases the damage dealt by the Aspis when thrown. Presumably that's a 5-point skill, so that will go up to 35%. So that's a fairly standard starting skill for the action skill. Increases movement speed and gun damage while holding the Aspis. Oh, so you can fire your gun while holding the Aspis as well. Being able to absorb damage and then deal damage back at the same time is crazy. That's very, very cool. Being able to move faster while absorbing damage, again, that's very useful even for a melee build. And the extra gun damage, if you're creating a gun damage build, then that's obviously very good. Otherwise, good for softening them up before you get in there with a melee attack. Vanguard, while the Aspis is active, you and nearby friends gain health regen. Health regen rate increases as the Aspis absorbs damage. Next level, health regen rate rank 1. Unfortunately, that's arbitrary, so we're not going to know quite what kind of effect that has. Obviously, they can't really put it into numbers because it increases based on the amount of absorbed damage. Potentially a good team skill. I'm not overly enamored by it though. What else is on this tier? Hold the line. Lengthens the duration of the Aspis can be active before it is automatically thrown. Up to 5.5 seconds presumably. Yeah, again, that's fairly standard. If you're looking to make an Aspis build for your action skill, obviously this seems to be the tree to go for. Being able to kind of move up faster while holding it for longer and then being able to deal more damage. Those three work quite well in tandem. Prismatic Aegis. The Aspis now stores the elemental damage type of absorbed damage. Multiple damage types can be stored and all stored damage types are thrown back. That's very, very cool. So all elemental damage you absorb while you've got it up will be dealt back along with the damage. United Front. Damage absorbed by the Aspis now provides power to your shields of you and your nearby friends. Okay, so that kind of works in conjunction with Vanguard. If you want to be a real team player, you can put up both of these and get health and shields back simultaneously. Again, not a massive fan of it, but if that's the way you want to play, then obviously these two work very well together. Clear, when thrown, the Aspis explosion grants second wind to all friends within range. Wow. In addition, you gain a damage bonus while in Fight for Your Life. So the damage bonus in Fight for Your Life itself isn't particularly good. That's a bit self-defeatist. I'm not a big fan of skills which only activate when Fight for Your Life. They generally aren't very good, but being able to grant second wind to everybody within the explosion of your Aspis, that's potentially extremely overpowered. That's akin to the Borderlands 2 power of the Siren being able to pick people up from a range using phase lock, except this is to everybody within a range, and it's only halfway down the tree. So I'm very much liking that skill. That could be potentially very powerful. Stalwart allows the Aspis to absorb a percentage of damage from your friend's guns, also increases your maximum health. Okay, so that allows your friends to kind of charge up your Aspis. Not a fan of that. Even with 5 points, it's 100% absorption. They may as well just be shooting the enemy. I'm not sure what the point would be in putting it into your Aspis. I guess if you can add 35% onto it with Invictus maybe. But it seems a little bit more hassle than it's worth, and trying to coordinate that. People may as well be shooting at the enemies, in my opinion. Return fire. When active, the Aspis has a chance to reflect incoming lasers and bullets while still absorbing their energy. I quite like the reflecting gimmick. I think it's quite fun. Is it particularly useful? Possibly not. Nice little add-on, I guess, if you really want to kind of max out your action skill. But what else is here? Prepare for glory. Activating your Aspis taunts nearby enemies, making them more likely to attack you. I already like that. Just because the amount of damage you're going to be taking in from enemies, which is going nowhere, being able to taunt them all so they're all firing on you instead of teammates, that's incredibly useful. To me, that's more useful than being able to recharge shields and health. Just being able to retract that damage completely. Additionally, for every individual enemy who inflicts damage on your Aspis, you gain a Prepare for Glory stack, increasing your gun damage. Stacks persist for... Okay, so that's quite a nice bonus added on. Gun damage plus 2% per stack. I don't know what the maximum stacks are yet. But the taunting effect, that's very, very cool. I probably prefer that over Return Fire. Lastly, Wrath of the Goddess. The Aspis will ricochet up to 4 additional enemies, each taking less damage than the last. And it will return to you afterwards. Aspis damage is reduced by 33% each time it ricochets. Okay, so this doesn't look particularly good at face value, but if each of the skills you've already invested in are applied to each of the 4 enemies, then that's potentially very, very powerful. You've got the extra damage from Invictus if you go down this tree anyway, so that can kind of start offsetting that 33%. If it's got a chance to bring someone back from fight for your life with every enemy it hits, then that's very cool. If it deals multiple elemental damages, if it deals multiple elemental effects for each time it hits an enemy, again, that's very cool. Especially if that has an area of an effect, you've got a chance to deal elemental damage 4 times over to groups of people. So I'm quite liking that. If you're maxing out this tree, definitely worth taking Wrath of the Goddess at the end then. Because that'll essentially be timesing a lot of these effects by 4. Not so much the damage, but other effects. I'm quite liking that. Okay, so now let's check out the middle tree, Xiphos. Gun Carter. Increases gun damage. Additionally, your melee damage is increased for a short duration after shooting an enemy. So your melee damage will go up by 50% with 5 points after shooting an enemy with an extra 50% gun damage. So it's more the melee damage I'm interested in there. 50% is quite a lot. And shooting an enemy once, that's not really a problem. Increased melee damage and maximum health. Melee damage will be up to 25%. Maximum health up to 15. So I'm going for Gun Carter with this one. I really want that melee damage for my melee build. And shooting an enemy before meleeing, that's not really like a hindrance. That's not like a problem for triggering that extra melee damage. I'm much preferring that over Clarity of Purpose. That's half the melee damage. It is permanent. But when I can just shoot an enemy and get 25% extra, I'm definitely going for that. Mercurial Kill Skill. Killing an enemy increases movement speed and damage resistance for a few seconds. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll probably know I'm all about that damage resistance. 25% damage resistance. If that's kind of absolute damage resistance, then that's very useful. Movement speed as well. So this is looking like the melee build tree. I'm very much liking these two together. Omega Senju. You deal increased damage to any enemy who has less than 50% of their maximum health remaining. So this is a good kind of finisher skill. An extra 35% with 5 points into any enemy who has less than 50% of their maximum health. This will be one to look out for, especially if you want to kind of melee a raid boss down. We'll find out in the future. Because that effect will have a very long-term effect. You'll be accumulating a lot of damage over time. For general combat versus weaker enemies, it's good. I like it. It's not. I wouldn't say it's essential, but that will definitely help you start killing off people a lot quicker. Rend. Your melee attacks cause enemies to bleed and causing damage over time. So this is essentially giving you elemental damage on your melee attack, but it's not any specific elemental, so you won't find it's weak against anything, so I very much like that. The damage is increased against higher health targets. That's a nice little bonus, and the damage also benefits from your melee damage bonuses. Deals up to 100% bonus damage against targets with high health, bleed duration 12 seconds. That's very cool. I'm definitely taking that one. Bloodlust, gain health regen whenever you make an enemy bleed. Oh my, for the duration of your bleed effect. So I'm much preferring that over Vanguard at the moment. But that's because I want to go for melee over Aspis. Obviously that's just down to whatever build you want to create. This effect stacks if you have multiple bleeding enemies. Wow, so 0.8% of max health. Presumably that will go up to 4% with 5 points. Per bleeding enemy. So if you're hitting a lot of people, you'll be getting that kind of effect over and over again. So yeah, I'm quite liking that. It's good to have at least one health regen, especially if you're a melee build. You either want damage resistance or you want health regen. Preferably both. Which she seems to have. So I'm liking that so far. Epicenter, slam alteration. So this is like the ground pound ability you have in this game. You got very high in the air, and then you kind of come down and slam the ground. When you slam, you will now create a singularity, pulling nearby enemies closer and dealing damage to them. That's a very underestimated skill for melee characters. In Borderlands 2, there was a shield called the Black Hole, which could pull people in. It was actually very useful for Krieg. Because it just pulled everyone in, it stopped them from shooting, and they were suddenly all just face to face with you, and you could just go to work on them. Tear increases gun damage dealt to bleeding target. Because of the way this is worded, I'm assuming it's only gun damage from you, in which case I'm not particularly liking it. It could work quite well actually with Gun Carter, but this isn't something I would really put my points into if there were other things I wanted. If I'm meleeing people to get them to bleed, I'm probably going to be meleeing them to kill them. I'm not going to be interested in meleeing them once and then trying to shoot them. If it was gun damage from all your allies as well, that would be very, very good. Like, that would be crazy overpowered. Right now I'm thinking it's only from you yourself, in which case I'm not a massive fan of it. You've got red on you. When an enemy is killed by your melee attacks or dies while bleeding, they explode. Nearby enemies will take damage from the blast. That's extremely good. That's kind of like Blood Explosion, except that you don't really get the stacking damage effect that you did with Krieg. But that was a kind of end tree skill. This is just before, but having enemies explode and cause kind of area of effect damage, that's very, very useful. Just being able to melee one enemy, have them deal, a quarter of an energy bar's worth of damage to the next enemy, really speeds things along. And if you're dealing with a very tight group of enemies, especially if you mix this with Epicenter, you're going to be doing crazy, crazy amounts of area of effect damage. So these two, definitely got my eye on these two. These two are going to work very well in tandem. Fury of the Arena, gain increased fire rate and reload speed for each bleeding target. So if you're looking to make a kind of gun damage build, then you're kind of looking to get Gun Carter and then mix it with Fury of the Arena and Tear. Personally, though, I'm going to be going with You've Got Red on You and Blood Rush. The melee override at the end of a skill tree, I'm a bit skeptical of. Press melee to dash forward. To dash forward an enemy and strike them with Zyphos with increased melee damage. This ability has a cooldown, so this basically seems to give you extra powerful melee attack plus a lunge. This attack applies a bleed to a target that isn't bleeding or kills that target. The cooldown is immediately reset. Perform a regular melee attack when Blood Rush is on cooldown. Okay. Wait. So if I apply a bleed to an enemy, it cools down instantly, so I'll be able to use it again and again. Surely if you have Rend active, your melee attacks cause enemies to bleed. If that's a 100% chance to cause enemies to bleed, then if you have a point in your melee override, every single one of your melees is going to become a melee override for extra 40% damage. I'm guessing that's why it's at the end of the tree, just because it can be used with Rend to just ridiculous effect. So I am really liking this tree, especially for a melee build. This is going to be insanely powerful. Blood Rush plus Rend. Really looking forward to using that. And Epicenter plus You've Got Red on You. All very, very cool. All working together extremely well. The melee build for Athena is going to be very, very fun, I'm thinking. On to the final tree, Ceramic Storm. Storm Weaving. When you swap weapons, you gain Storm Weaving, increasing your fire rate and elemental effect chance for short duration. Elemental effect chance plus 25% for next level. If that's a 5-point skill, then that would go up to 125%. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that maybe this is only a 1-point skill, which is strange to have at the beginning of a tree. Duration 9 seconds. Fire rate plus 7.5%. Otherwise, you could just swap your weapons 5 times and you'd be well over 35% fire rate. That seems a little bit overpowered, so I'm going to assume that's a 1-point skill. I may be wrong though. Maelstrom. Dealing incendiary or shock damage causes you to gain stacks of Maelstrom. So this is a stack tree. I'm guessing all elemental damage dealt is increased for each stack of Maelstrom. Stacks will decay over time, and this rate of decay increases as you accumulate more stacks at 0.4%. Okay, so you can make basically an elemental stacking damage build if you want. So this is very much like Krieg. You got your melee build, and then you've got your elemental build. Conduit, when you have at least one electrocute status effective active. So when you've used a shock weapon on an enemy, you regenerate a percentage of your shields every second for each stack of Maelstrom you have. Not a massive fan of that. It seems like you're going to have to get a lot of stacks up just to get shield regen. Seems slightly pointless to me. Gathering Tempest increases magazine size and reload speed. I'm much more a fan of that. Reload speed is a fantastic ability to have. And if you're mixing that with a gun build, with gun caster and all that jazz, then reload speed, you're really going to begin to appreciate that, especially with magazine size as well. And those are big numbers, plus 5 points into that, and you're looking at a really good gun buff. Smite. While you are airborne, shooting an enemy will smite them, causing incendiary and shock damage in a small area. Okay, so that's going to help build your Maelstrom stacks, standard, without even having to use an elemental damage by the looks of it. Smite damage increases as you accumulate more stacks of Maelstrom. Wow, so these just bounce back between each other by the looks of it. Smite gives you Maelstrom stacks gives you more Smite damage, and this ability has a cooldown. Minimum Maelstrom stacks 10 to work, cooldown 12 seconds. Oh, right, okay, so you can only really do it once every 12 seconds. In which case that's not quite as good as I thought it was. In fact, that's not very good at all. I'm not really liking that now. Unrelenting kill skill. Killing an enemy increases your weapon swap speed and fire rate for each stack of Maelstrom. Fire rate obviously very useful. Again, if you're building a gun class, you can get Gathering Tempest and Unrelenting. With Maelstrom, you're looking at even more of a gun buff. If you're using an incendiary or shock weapon, obviously that's going to go back onto Maelstrom, and these can work very well in tandem. Superconductor. Aspis has a chance to shock nearby enemies when struck. When this occurs, you gain Maelstrom stacks. That's very cool. Shock chance 10%. So that's basically giving your action skill a way of fueling your Maelstrom stacks. Zeus's Rage. When you throw the Aspis, a devastating fire and lightning storm will spawn at the target location, doing area damage. So fire and lightning, again, I assume that will fuel your Maelstrom stacks. The damage of the storm increases based on the amount of damage absorbed by the Aspis. Okay, so that's kind of buffing your Aspis again, but also feeding into Maelstrom stacks. So I'm going to say Maelstrom is a pretty much must-have if you're going down this tree. Elemental Barrage. While Storm Weaving is active, your weapons have a chance to not consume ammo. So this is essentially like inconceivable for Salvador. This is increased for every Maelstrom stack you have. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a 1-point skill. And that kind of feeds into this. But this also works with Maelstrom. So Storm Weaving is looking less and less pointful. I'm going to probably say ignore Storm Weaving. Unless you've got a point left over, you may as well do it. But otherwise, definitely going down Maelstrom route here. Where are we? Overload. Whenever you kill an enemy who's electrocuted or burning, there is a chance for the status effect to chain to a nearby enemy. And when this occurs, you gain bonus Maelstrom stacks. That's nice. Bonus stacks 20. Wow. How many Maelstrom stacks can you have? It's looking like a lot. This bonus is gained twice if the target is both burning and electrocuted. That's very, very cool. That's 5 points as well. That's going to be very, very powerful. Flash freeze. Whenever you freeze an enemy, you gain a flash freeze for a short duration. During this time, you cannot gain or lose maelstrom stacks. That's terrible. Maybe I'm not thinking about something, but I just don't think that looks very good at all. Whenever you freeze an enemy, you gain flash freeze. No, I'm not liking this. You cannot gain or lose maelstrom stacks. That's basically kind of freezing your stacks by using a freeze weapon. Maybe if there's a lull in combat, then that might be useful, but this seems very situational and just too situational to actually be useful. It's not something I'm going to think about midway through a gunfight. Hades Shackle, slamming, so that's like the ground pound again, links you to nearby enemies with a shock tether, electrocuting them. This tether is broken if you lose line of sight, but any enemy still tethered at the end of the duration or who die while tethered release an incendiary nova, and you gain bonus maelstrom stacks for each enemy affected. So it's kind of like blood explosion again, except it will also build you stacks. This ability has a cooldown, 15 seconds. That's quite a long cooldown. But I quite like this tree. It ties in very well with the gun build. So you want to make a gun build, I'm going to say probably go down Xiphos a little bit and then Ceramic Storm. For melee build, for me personally, I'm going to be going down Xiphos, down Gun Carter, Mercurial or Senshu, but probably Mercurial, Rend, Bloodlust, Epicenter plus, you've got red on you, it's too good to pass up. And then Blood Rush plus the Rend, going to be very cool. And I quite like the idea of just buffing my Aspis as well, just to kind of help me get in close to enemies. So I'll probably be taking Ephidos, Hold the Line, Prismatic Aegis, and at least Clear. I'm not sure how far I'm going to be able to get down here by level 50. Obviously when the skill cap increase comes in, it'll be a lot better, but Clear, and then probably start feeding to prepare for glory. But I'm liking these two trees the most. If you're looking for a gun build, I would go for these two. Anyway, that's my personal opinion. And that rounds off Athena. Next video will be whoever the next character along is. I believe it's Wilhelm. If you've watched this far or if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It does help promote the channel. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.